What's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Sam Shapiro back here with more of your latest on FanArc. Be sure to drop the channel a sub and like this video. We got a lot of great content here, and today we're going to dive into some Summer League prospects that I think could make a good final roster spot for Miami as they head into the regular season and start to look ahead towards that. Clearly, they're not going to utilize, maybe signing a free agent anytime soon. At least it doesn't look that way right now. So if they're not going to utilize what's still available on the market, they might as well look into what talent they've been able to develop over the last few weeks, considering that's kind of part of really Heat culture. And I think it would beat more to their drum and what they're about. So if they're going to at least try to, fill up that last roster spot before the season starts, they might as well look at what they already got in house. I definitely think it would benefit them to bring in somebody else and not just settle with what they've got right now. It wouldn't hurt. I think Myron Gardner is very deserving of this last roster spot, or he's at least one candidate that I would be excited to see Miami bring on board to start the regular season. I just think in terms of two-way play, he is one of the better options Miami has to pick out of a few players that I'm going to touch on right now. A 6'6" guy that could shoot 47% from the field, scored roughly 10 points in Summer League play, and was great at rebounding, bringing in roughly 6 boards per game during that entire stint that he was playing over this past summer. And he also led the team in deflections and hustle plays, so that again beats to the drum that Heat culture is all about. And I just think that Miami would really be able to develop a guy like that whose two-way game looks like is on the up and up. And I would like to see a guy like him at least be given a shot, even if they decide after a couple months that he's not really gelling and he's not developing into the wing player Miami kind of needs in this last roster spot right now. It wouldn't be the end of the world if they let him go or whatnot. But I just think that he would be definitely a good option for Miami to look into. He would also complement the likes of Wiggins and Fontecchio very well at the 3 spot, just adding more depth to Miami overall. So I definitely think he'd be a good option worth looking into, at least for South Beach, heading into the 2025-26 regular season. Another solid option that I think proved himself over this Summer League season, Erik Stevenson, was very, very elite in terms of playmaking ability, also scoring roughly 10 points per game, shooting not as efficiently as Gardner, but I definitely think that in terms of the playmaking ability, he would be able to kind of fluctuate between that 2 and 3 spot and could give Miami a little bit of a boost offensively, already complementing their super strong backcourt, but also complementing players kind of similar to how Myron Gardner would in Fontecchio and Wiggins, just bringing a little bit more firepower. Definitely showed that he is a clutch time type of player, making some pretty big shots against Milwaukee in Boston in Summer League play. So I definitely think he wouldn't be worth overlooking. Also being 26, he's a little bit older than what you'd like to see in a Summer League player, but I think that being 26, he kind of plays with a chip on his shoulder, kind of similarly to how Max Strus and Gabe Vincent did when they were on the up and up in South Beach. So I think Stevenson also very deserving of a potential roster spot for Miami, and I wouldn't necessarily wouldn't be upset to see him get that last spot over Gardner if they decide to give him a deal when the season tips off. So Erik Stevenson, definitely a solid option to sign, but I do think that Myron Gardner maybe would have the edge over him just because of how he shot a little bit more efficiently and size-wise just a little bit bigger than this 2-3 guard. Now, another player that I think Miami could also be worth bringing on board for the tip-off of the regular season, Dain Dainja is definitely an interesting player that Miami could look at. Could definitely be another big man that Miami kind of really needs, being 6'9", nearly 270 pounds. He definitely brings a lot of size in terms of down low, but he's also pretty quick for a guy that size and could really fluctuate between the 3 and 4 spot. He also shot just under 60% across just a few games in the summer, from 5 games exactly in the Summer League. And, when you have a guy shooting at a high clip like that and he's bringing some size, some people might say he would kind of overlap with maybe what Vlad Golden would be trying to bring to Miami in terms of a bigger player maybe that would be adding depth to South Beach. But I don't know. having the size at any of those positions in the 305 definitely can't hurt, especially on the defensive front. And I think Dainja, especially with the journey he had taken through college and the NBA so far, he's also kind of playing with a chip on his shoulder, would fit into Heat culture very well. And in just 13 minutes over Summer League play, also averaged about 9 points per game. And, didn't have any, I would say, star-studded, amazing, shocking performances that would make me go, oh my God, he has to be signed, over Stevenson or Gardner. But I think that the potential is definitely there. And I think that he wouldn't necessarily be a bad option to bring on board for, like I've been saying, the tip-off of the regular season. So Dain Dainja also would be a pretty solid option to utilize coming to South Beach on that, on that last roster spot deal. I think, like I said before, the size could make him also a threat defensively, could pose a lot more of a threat in the front court. And as he continues to utilize on that that efficient shooting, I'd like to see the points kind of go up from there. And then in that case, you got a great two-way forward, and Miami also kind of needing a little bit some more depth in terms of their front court. So I definitely don't think it would necessarily hurt to have him at the 4 spot, even though Miami is kind of more of in need of a wing. You could kind of fluctuate him, to the 3 and the 4. And I don't really think that would be the worst option in the world to kind of use that last roster spot on a guy that could be flexible, at least in the rotation there, and would be efficient offensively as well. Now, the other 2 guys that I think Miami could consider maybe giving this last roster spot to, Javonte Cook and Bryson Warren, being maybe 2 other candidates to look into. Unfortunately, I would say Warren maybe needs a little bit more time. He seems a bit more of a long-term project. He kind of just, I feel like, needs to develop a little bit more and should probably spend a little bit more time in the D League compared to some of these other guys I had just mentioned. Necessarily, maybe not the best fit, I would say, right now, or at least for the tip-off of this regular season. But I'm not saying that potentially couldn't change in the long run, and he could end up benefiting Miami maybe in the 26-27 NBA season if he doesn't kind of develop into more of a player that either Gardner, Steven, or Dainja have been, or at least showed signs of that over this past summer. But I definitely think that Javonte Cook is definitely not a bad option to look at right now either. For a wing position, 6'6", not totally bad, would probably be more of a 2, but he proved that he can score in certain scenarios, not shooting super duper consistently, but he did have an 18-point outburst versus Atlanta this year. Showed signs that he could, shoot the ball pretty well. In the D League, his track record also kind of adds up. He averaged 17 points per game with the OKC Blue, and I just think that he's been showing signs that he could also be pretty promising if he were to get that last roster spot for the beginning of this season. And however, I wouldn't give him the edge necessarily over Gardner or Stevenson, just because it seemed like offensively they were a bit more consistent than he was. And that was why, and just because of Gardner's size as well, and because of his ability on the defensive end as well, I would give it to Gardner maybe over Javonte Cook. But, kind of similar-ish players. I just think Cook, a little bit more streakiness to his game, definitely didn't show as much consistency. Stevenson showing that he could show up in the clutch and make those tough shots when the game is on the line also is maybe why I would be a little bit more excited to see him get that roster spot instead. But, any of those 4 guys I think wouldn't necessarily be a bad option just because of what they would be able to bring in their own regard. Gardner, I think, a complete 2-way game, very consistent offensively. Stevenson showing that he's a clutch offensive player, and Dainja just being size and the flexibility with where in the depth chart he could play, I think would make 3 great candidates to bring on in that last roster spot. But Cook also showing that he can heat up when he needs to, and if Miami needed to pull a firecracker offensively out of nowhere in terms of the end of the season, that he also might not necessarily be a bad option to pull out as well. But I think that Bryson Warren maybe needs a little bit more time to develop. And I wouldn't want to see him potentially get a deal over any of those 4 guys. Well, let me know what you think in the comments. Which of any of those 5 candidates I had just mentioned you think is the most deserving of a roster spot in terms of when the season begins to tip off. I'd like to see maybe one of them get signed if Miami doesn't decide to pick up somebody currently in free agency, but only time will tell, and we'll be covering it right here if any of those guys do get picked up. And if Miami decides to either utilize the talent they've been developing over this past summer league season, or if they check back in with what's available left on the free agency mark. That's going to do it for me right now, but be sure to tune into all our daily content going forward. Drop a like on this video, and be sure to subscribe for great daily content right here going forward here on your Heat Latest. I'm Sam Shapiro, and that's going to do it for me. Have a great day.